Hi, and welcome to episode 31 of Empathic Action. Today I'm joined by Jessica Xiao, who is living and studying and working in Washington, D.C. She's a grad student at Georgetown University studying public policy and also works in communications with the Asian American Journalists Association. I thought it would be great to have her for a conversation to talk a little bit about how we can reflect on our relationships and our thoughts about the Asian community in the diaspora, given what's happening with COVID-19. So I want to start by just asking what the Asian American Journalists Association is all about. So Jessica, welcome.
Sure. Hi, Anita. Thank you so much for having me. First, I do some work for the Asian American Journalists Association, but what I'm saying is all kind of reflective of my own experiences and not of the organization's views. So the Asian American Journalists Association is a diversity and visibility press association with members who are AAPI journalists across the US and globally. We do a lot of professional development, career development work for young and emerging journalists, as well as for senior journalists. We love to have diversity in the newsroom and to make sure that our journalists are in leadership positions as well.
So at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, I believe there was probably a lot of unfavorable, biased reporting, and the organization issued an advisory to the media. Can you speak to that?
Yes, for sure. So when coronavirus was first reported about, it was primarily referred to by the region where it was first discovered, as well as reference to with images of Chinatowns or of Asian people wearing masks. And we knew that this kind of imagery and these types of words would relate and associate one group and population of people with this virus more than others. And what typically happens when people are fearful and anxious is that they might try and avoid this population. So we released a media advisory in February, just warning publications to be careful about the way that they are covering the coronavirus and to make sure that not unintentionally causing biases by including pictures of Chinatowns when COVID is not just found in Chinatowns, and when people who are wearing masks it doesn't necessarily mean they have the disease. I think people know that now, but at the time it wasn't so clear.
Right. And so for people who are maybe playing devil advocate saying, well, you know what, it started in Wuhan, China, so why not have images of Chinese people associated with the story? What would you say to that in terms of, the real implications, how, the worst case scenario, it leads to hate crimes, and then just how it also feeds into implicit bias?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that there are a lot of messages and stereotypes that we are seeing about Chinese people rise to the consciousness, whether they are messages that we know that we have internalized or not. So I've heard a lot of talk about how Chinese people will eat anything, about how Chinese people will eat dog, or eat really just like dirty things, or how Chinese people are dirty. And a lot of these assumptions are being fed into by the coverage and by the fact that people are associating China so closely with this virus and blaming them for this virus coming to be. So I think that while it's true that a lot of previous diseases have been named for specific regions, there's actually been a movement to kind of deassociate them with specific regions because in particular of some of the negative things that happen to those geographic populations. For example, Ebola actually is named after a river rather than for that village because the scientists were trying to not associate it with a specific group of people. But unfortunately, there was still a lot of anti-Blackness and a lot of anti-Black sentiment during the Ebola crisis. So I think that this virus, the way that it was covered, caused or a lot of, when you are fearful and anxious, like I mentioned before, I think it causes a lot of these reactions to anyone who's considered other to come out because we're trying to protect our own in some ways. I think that's a natural fear response. So I've heard of things, although I've not been personally, thankfully, impacted in a large way. I know, for example, there was an Asian American family that was stabbed in Texas. There have been really racist and just very just very hurtful things being said on camera or telling people to go back to their country to Asian Americans, regardless of whether they're Chinese or not, because it's just kind of, we have a very distinctive look. So
I guess since these episodes are all about empathy on some level or another, I wonder whether or not you have any suggestions or comments, feedback for anybody who's watching who's not a member of the Asian diaspora, how they might want to think about this issue differently, how they may want to behave differently so they can show a little bit more empathy towards the Asian community writ large.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that there are people thinking about this. I appreciate that you're giving me the space to talk about this in a public way. I think that a lot of it is about reflections on the way that we react to things, and to just to keep the knowledge that we are a conglomeration of our previous experiences and the society that we grow up in. So there are definitely biases that we have that come from the way that we've experienced the world. And so when we're having reactions to things, to just kind of check and reflect on them before we act out on them necessarily. The other thing I would say is just to check in on your Asian friends and see how they're doing. Just say, hey, how are you doing in this time? Like, is there anything that I can do to support you? If it's just somebody to vent to, for example. So just let them know that you're still supportive or in solidarity with them, or that you, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about human relationships. So that you're still in relationship with people. And that in itself is a really big comfort. And if you can afford it, to support your Asian businesses, which were very harmed before the sheltering in place started, because people were already avoiding those businesses before we can't go to any of them.
Great. Well, that's such great advice, and thank you so much for speaking about this issue with me, Jessica. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and see you tomorrow.